Welcome to the Real Estate Secrets Podcast for healthcare professionals, hosted by Austin Hare and Nathan Palmer, who together have over 2 decades of real estate knowledge and investing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we have a guest, Dr. Eric Block. He's the partner of Acton Dental Associates, and he's the founder of dealsfordentists.com. It's where dentists can go just to find new customer offers across the entire dental industry. So if this is your first time listening in or you've been listening, then we kindly ask that you subscribe to our podcast. It helps obviously with our rankings, and it helps spread the word out there so we can continue to educate people all things related to real estate and healthcare best business practices. So without further ado, Dr. Eric Block, how's it going today, man?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are currently in Boston, correct?
Yeah, so I'm about 30 minutes west of Boston in a town called Acton, which is near, most people have heard of Concord. So I usually just say near Concord, but we're about 30 minutes west of Boston.
Okay, great. And so how long have you been in the dental industry for at this stage?
Almost 20 years, actually. Yeah, I graduated dental school in '02, and then I did a 2-year residency and finished in '04, and then I entered private practice after that.
So a little bit more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. So how did you decide that you wanted to do this with your life? Was there anything that happened as a child that you knew right away, or did it happen kind of later on?
Good question. So actually my dad was a dentist. He's retired, but so I'd always been around it, but I actually went to Tulane as a business major, and I was going to focus on business. And then I took a couple classes like micro and macroeconomics, and there was like 500 kids in the class and statistics. And I just said, nah, this isn't for me. So I switched actually to psychology because I had to pick something. And there wasn't a pre-med or pre-dental major at Tulane at the time. I'm not sure if there is now, but I started thinking about either applying to become a doctor, a dentist. I was also looking into physical therapy. I wanted to focus more on the health professions. So I started taking all the prereq classes, the sciences. And then one night at a bar in New Orleans, I had a beer bottle in my hand and I just missed my mouth and I hit my front tooth and it cracked in half. And my friends were like scrambling around to get the piece of tooth, and they were kind of messing with me. One of them kept it in his wallet, I think, for the whole semester, just to kind of mess with me. But so the rest of that night I walked around with half my front tooth missing. So the next day I went to a local dentist in Metairie, Louisiana. And I just really liked the experience of how they patched me up and fixed me, and just the whole atmosphere there. The experience was just something that was really I really enjoyed. So I started hanging around my dad's office more, and I started thinking more about dentistry. And then I ended up taking a year off after Tulane because I had to finish up with the prereq classes. So I finished up with chemistry and physics, and I taught tennis for a year, and then I applied to dental school and I got in. I ended up going down to Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah, Nova, I'm from Florida, so Nova's a big one down here for sure. We hear about like a lot of good stuff from them. All right, so now you first became a dentist, and how long did it take you from before you were kind of moving up to, associate or partner? Like, what was that story like?
Yeah, so after dental school, after Nova, I did a 2-year residency at BU, which that actually brought me back up here because I'm originally from Massachusetts. So it was a 2-year program that focused on implants, and I learned how to place and restore implants and extraction and bone grafts. And after that, I associated for way too long. So I associated for about 9 or 10 years after BU, and I worked in many different offices, different styles of offices. I even traveled around. It was like an implantologist that traveled around to different offices, placing and restoring implants. So about 5 years ago is when I transitioned to become a partner. So I associated for a long time before making that next step to become a partner or owner.
Okay. So you mentioned it was too long. What makes you think it's too long? And like, if you were having to advise someone, like how long would you say is the ideal time for making that transition?
For me, it was a matter of maturity. I didn't feel mature or ready enough to go out and to do my own thing. And I got kind of comfortable being an associate, and you just kind of go in, you do your thing, and you don't really have to worry about the business side of or the staff. So I kind of like that. But if I was to redo it and go back, I would probably have done maybe 2 years as an associate. Kind of dabbled in different types of offices like a DSO or fee for service, private practice, rural, urban, just a really good mix. I would have looked for, and also obviously finding great mentors in these practices are important. But I think the sweet spot would have been 2 years, so I could have picked up my speed and honed my skills and try to figure out what kind of practice I wanted to open, and taken those lessons and kind of molded my own practice. So I think about 2 years would have been ideal.
Well, there's something to be said about just having a job and not owning a business, because really, you see all these memes all the time about, quit your job. If you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life. But owning a business is not for everybody. There's a lot that goes into it. And sometimes, I would say a lot of times, it doesn't even end up being more freeing than when you are just an employee or an associate, right? Like there's a couple reasons I think people become business owners. There's financial freedom, there's geographic freedom, and there's time freedom. And so a lot of times you're working like 80-hour, you trade in your 9 to 5, your 40-hour job for an 80-hour job where you're stuck at a single spot and you can't go anywhere. So, I understand why it might have taken you longer to get to that point, because it is a big trade-off that you're doing. Now, obviously the idea is that you put in the work up front, so that way later on you can reap some of those benefits, right? So now, what was it?
Especially, I was going to say, especially now, during a pandemic, as an owner, I may make less money as an owner during a pandemic or a recession, but as an associate, you may make no money. You may lose your job because that owner may need to cut your position. So, during a recession or a pandemic, I feel a little more comfortable being an owner of a business than if I was just an employee.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of a metaphor. It's like your boss is who pays you. And so if you are an employee, you have one boss, right? If you are the business owner, well, how many clients do you have? Like, how many people do you have paying you? You probably have hundreds. So you have hundreds of bosses. So what's the big deal if one of them fires you, right? You still have hundreds of other bosses that are paying you. So there's a lot of risk diversification in that situation. So, one thing that we talked about earlier that I would love to bring up for everybody listening is just the mental illness. And, I was reading the other day that when somebody suffers a traumatic physical event, they're seriously injured, the response is overwhelming. People show up in the hospital, they give you cards, they sympathize with you. But if you have a mental traumatic event, it's very, very different. It's almost like you're shamed for that. And people aren't going to be showing up, in the hospital and giving you cards and doing all these things. A lot of times it's like, hey, listen, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get better. So I know you have some experience in that sort of field.
Yeah. So actually, that reminds me of when I first told my parents that I was going to therapy and taking medications for my stress and anxiety. I was visiting them down in Florida, and I told them, and I sort of expected the response. It was more like a surprised response, and I'm so sorry that you're going through this, and feeling sorry for me. But for me, I felt like it should have been more good for you for doing something about it and taking care of yourself. And I was a psychology major at Tulane, so I'd always really thought about at some point I want to go and get therapy, because I feel like your brain is like a muscle. When you exercise your biceps at the gym, you should exercise your brain, and going to therapy is like exercising your brain. So, in dentistry, there's every phase of the profession has its different levels of stress or different stressors. And I felt stress throughout every phase, from in dental school to after school, being an associate and working under other people's rules and with their staff and not having control. Then the decision to transition to become a partner. And then the most stressful phase of all for me personally was becoming an owner or partner. And I was suffering burnout, anxiety. I was nervous all the time. I was always afraid of getting sued, or my personality is I always was a people pleaser. I always wanted to make everyone happy and like me, and wanted to be the cool, fun guy with the staff or the owners or the patients. And I'm also an introvert, so socializing, which dentistry is a very social profession, because you need to, no one wants an unhappy or sad dentist working on them. So you got to kind of be on and go in there with a big happy face and give that patient a great experience. But meanwhile, for me as an introvert, that was exhausting, especially, I would have 10 patients in my chair, and then I'd be bouncing around to hygiene rooms. So by the end of the day, I was just wiped and totally exhausted. So I knew I had to do something. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I can't practice like this for the next 30 years. Something's got to give. So I took some action and started going to see a therapist, and along with therapy and some mixture of finding the right combination of medications and a lot of changes at work, I'm now back to the point where I don't feel burnout, a lot less anxiety and stress, and I enjoy going to work every day. So it took years, but it's been a big turnaround for me.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that, we had like the capacity that we have. I mean, as we get more and more advanced as a society, like we have our needs are met. And so when you have it's easy to have a purpose when you're looking to put food on the table. You know what I mean? That gives you a reason to get up and keep going. Like when all your physical needs are met, then we start looking for new purpose. And so in our society where we're so advanced, I mean, the quality of life is higher than it's ever been. This need for survival is totally irrelevant. Anybody can survive. And ironically, that takes away the desire to survive. It's, you know what I mean? It's this catch-22. So what was your first kind of indication? Because I think that a lot of people might be going through something that's maybe hovering under the surface where it's just not quite right. And it's hard to talk about, because especially like the masculine identity is kind of that hey, like I'm good, everything's fine, like my emotions are good. We don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. It's hard to. So what was if for everybody listening, is there any sort of indicator that could be significant that hey, I might need to go see a therapist, or I might need to really check this out?
Yeah, I was really, it was just, I think, a matter of building up inside of me that I was just so nervous all the time. And I dreaded going into work every day, even doing simple procedures in dentistry, like I was putting a crown in. I was always so nervous. I was afraid of doing something wrong or getting sued. Then there was some staff issues. There was some poor culture with staff that had poor behavior that had been tolerated for years. And I just was tired of pleasing everyone and trying to make everyone else happy. So I was saying no to myself and yes to everyone else. And I said that I can't, continue to practice like this. And I was coming home exhausted, and I would leave for lunch. I would cruise on out of there and go home. I live, 7 minutes away from the office. So I would get out of there as fast as I could to kind of, not socialize with anyone and go home to decompress. And I finally had the courage to pick up the phone and call a therapist. And that was probably the biggest kind of eureka moment for me, was just making that phone call. And
What was the breaking point? Like what finally just led to actually making the phone call?
There was a few events at work with the staff. There was some crying and fighting and poor behavior that really made me question and regret becoming a practice owner. And so it was a few staff issues that really made me make that phone call.
So obviously it's great that you decided to take action. Do you wish that you had done it sooner?
Oh yeah, definitely. I wish I had done it, when I first got out of my, my career. Although, dentistry is such a complex business and situation that to talk to a regular, traditional therapist was great. But engaging with peers who have walked in my shoes and are also dentists is like therapy in itself. Because I would talk to my therapist and I'd go on this big, long, 25-minute rant about something at work. And then after she'd be like, wait a second, what does the hygienist do again? And I'd be like, oh, I just spent this long, draining rant about, some stresses at work, but it's hard to put into context for someone that's not in the profession exactly what I was going through. So reaching out to my peers was also a major stress relief. I would talk to my friends on the phone and we would talk about stories at work. And I felt like this huge relief after I'd get off the phone because I realized that, I'm not alone that's feeling this type of stress from the profession.
So it sounds like it's equal parts being able to talk to a counselor, but also just being able to relate to another person, another guy who could empathize with you.
Yep.
So what advice do you have for people? Like, was there any big takeaways or any certain things or actions that you did that have helped you to kind of recover from this?
Yeah, I would say, being more comfortable in my own skin, and that was not easy to do. That took a couple of years of therapy and saying, yes to myself and no to others. And I just stopped caring. And I'm not talking about caring about, the treatment or patients or, people's, lives or situations, but more, I just stopped caring about what people thought of me. And if they didn't like what I had to say, then, it is what it is. I'm your boss. And I say it nicely, but, if you don't agree with what I say, you're my employee and this is the culture that I'm setting. Or if a patient doesn't agree with my treatment, and I've presented to them the best I can with all their options and gave them a educated presentation, and they want to go somewhere else, that's fine. I don't lose sleep over it. Whereas earlier in my career, I would get so upset if a patient didn't schedule that appointment with me, or if a staff member didn't agree with me, or I was so worried about everyone else and not taking care of myself. So now I'm more comfortable saying no to others. And I feel like when I say no to them, it's saying yes to myself.
That's good. And I know earlier when we talked, you mentioned that the website and the book was kind of part of your therapy, right?
Yeah. So the website dealsfordentist.com was my Corona shutdown project. So I didn't want to just, after, trying to homeschool a 5 and 7-year-olds and, that wasn't working out. I was getting, my wife's a teacher, so she was better at doing that. So I had to do something, and I started the website, but I had the idea for about a year or two, and I finally had the time to put it together. And it's essentially a free marketplace where dentists can go on the site and look for new customer offers from vendors, across the industry. So it's ungated. There's no membership fee, so dentists can go on and browse or target specific categories or types of products. And I found that was a great distraction from the office and also the pandemic, the uncertainty that was going on. And then I started to write a book, which should be out in February.
Oh, nice. What's it going to be
And
called?
it's tentatively titled The Stressed Out Dentist. So
The stressed
that's
out dentist. I like it.
yeah, that may change, but that's
It's
it's
got a
going to
good
be
ring
about
to it.
it's going to be about mental health and the stresses of the dental profession, and kind of my story and what I did to get back to enjoy going to work every day. But yeah, the website and the podcast that I do and the book are just great distractions. So I think that having other avenues and other things going on and other businesses are a great distraction from the office, because if I was just doing dentistry and just focusing on the practice, then I think my brain would just be on overload thinking about the office, the office, the office. Whereas I have other things going on, I can, I think you're right when you said that is kind of therapy in itself, having those other businesses.
So, and that makes sense to me. Starting a new venture can definitely give you purpose, right? Like you're kind of creating a problem for yourself, but that can also motivate you to solve that problem. But the question I have is like, so when you're in that state where you are stressed out or anxious or depressed, you can have this idea to start something like a website or a book, and you can even know that it's going to bring you out of that. But getting the motivation to start seems like a separate issue. So how do you get the motivation to start something when you're in that state of mind?
Yeah, good question. I during the pandemic, the shutdown, I knew I had to do something, and I couldn't just sit there and, eat my kids' leftover French fries and chicken nuggets. Um, I had to do something, and I had the idea, and so I started going on YouTube videos and learning how to build a website, and I was also in the market for a new credit card, a cash rewards credit card. So I was going on the credit card comparison sites, and I just really liked the layout and the organization of the credit card websites. So I wanted to combine the two. So I combined a comparison site with dentistry, and I knew that also the conventions and the face-to-face interactions with your local rep and the study clubs and the trade shows may not be around for a while. So I wanted to kind of bring the convention price directly to the dentist's office computer, because I used to wait until Yankee Dental for the convention price to do a lot of my shopping, and those conventions, may not be around for a while. So I had all those ideas floating around in my head, but I never had the time to actually do it. So the silver lining of the Corona shutdown was that I actually had the time to actually do it.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like COVID ended up really being a gift to you to kind of pull you out of this and give you the external kick in the pants to get it started. Do you think there's any ways to artificially create that situation for people like who don't have the gift of a coronavirus lockdown to motivate them?
Yeah, I think that, in general, if you're just feeling like you dread going to work every day, if you are burnt out, anxiety, if you don't enjoy the people that you work with, it's hard as an employee or an associate, because you don't really have much control over those factors. You're working under someone else's roof, with someone else's staff and supplies. But if you're an owner of a practice or a business, then, make the changes. Do what makes you happy. If you buy some expensive equipment that doesn't quite have the return on investment, but makes you happy, then maybe you should do it. You should enjoy going to work every day. Make yourself comfortable at work. Surround yourself with people that you like. And if you're in a situation where you're an associate or employee and you can't really do that, I think that finding something else outside of work, like a side hustle or another business venture, is such a great distraction for stress relief for your mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting how creating a side hustle could pull you out of, a mental setback or stall or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I actually kind of went through the same thing when I sold my businesses. I used to have 3 gyms that I ran and owned. And, I remember when I sold them, it solved a lot of these problems that I had in my life. So I had the problem because it's a franchise. So I had the problem of dealing with the franchisor who I did not like at all. We did not get along. They took advantage of the franchisees a lot, and it made a really difficult situation and how you were handcuffed. Right. And then I also had so that problem was solved. And then also I got a large payment up front. So my money problem was solved. So all of a sudden, and then, I had less time, like I had more time. So like all of a sudden, all 3 things, like I had relationship, emotional problem solved. I had financial problem solved. I had my time constraint solved, all 3 at once. And all of a sudden it's like, I had all these problems solved. And I was like, man, like there's actually a feeling of emptiness, and I was like, man, what am I, like, what's the point of doing it? What's the point of getting up in the morning? Right. Like what am I going to do? And so I had to actually, like, it took a while. Like I took a little bit of time to where I slowed down and stuff like that, but I had to create something for myself to do so that I could like contribute to society, so that I could be productive. Cause I mean, we all think like, the goal is to just make a lot of money and retire and do nothing, but really that's not the goal. I mean, we are designed to contribute, we're designed to solve problems and make the world a better place. And so I think it's really a great point, and really interesting how like you can solve some of your problems, like your mental problems, like your stress or your anxiety or depression problems, by creating a new problem, right? Like something to solve that gives you purpose. And so it's something that is like, it's not commonsensical at all, but in hindsight, like it really makes sense. So yeah, it's really fascinating. And so that, and part of that reason is why I started doing commercial real estate and why we created the podcast, because we want to help educate people, and we just want to provide value and to other people listening. So yeah, it's cool, man. And with the website, so Deals for Dentists, like, what kind of savings are people getting? Like right now, what do you think is the best offer on the site? And like how much, can someone expect to save by going through that site?
There's some really great offers, and it really depends on what you're looking for. There's consultants, there's software, there's equipment. So it's really a broad range of categories. And you can target specific categories, or you can kind of scroll through all of them, but I'm creating it in a way where they're even exposure. So there isn't, one vendor isn't getting more exposure than the other. So I'm going to be rotating the promos and deals. So if you're looking for a software, if you're looking for advice, consultants, coaches, equipment, it's all on there. So, and we're adding more and more every week. So it's hopefully going to be the go-to place for dentists to, before they buy something, to go on the website to see if they can save some money, and also time, because I used to search the web. I used to call around different reps and or wait until the convention, and it was very time consuming. So I wanted to create one marketplace for all dentists to go and find new customer offers and discounts.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, that's dealsfordentists.com. I'll drop that in the show notes. And let everybody know what's the name of your podcast and what would be a good way to get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out.
Yeah, so it's the Deals for Dentists podcast, and also my email is info@dealsfordentist.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. Podcast is on the website, it's on YouTube, it's on Dental Town, and it's on every major audio platform as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, I will drop those 3 things in the show notes. So yeah, hey, it's been great chatting with you. And I just want to thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I mean, this show is very different than where we normally go with it, but I think it's just as important, if not more important, than a lot of the things that we talk about, because this is the underlying basis that everything is built on, your ability to do the things that you learn about and that you hear about and you read about. If you're not there mentally, then you're not going to be able to execute, So I really appreciate you sharing everything that you've gone through and helping our listeners.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right, man. Well, you have a great day, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Take care.
All right, thanks.